The ships came on a cold morning in December, stood on the observation deck of Seoul Station, a military space platform that floated high above the Earth. She was a captain in the Korean Space Defense Force, and she had spent 15 years watching the stars. She had always wondered if something was out there. Now she had her answer. The alien vessels were beautiful and terrible. They looked like giant crystals, each one glowing with soft blue light. There were hundreds of them. They moved slowly through the clouds and took positions over every major city on Earth. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Seoul. The whole world watched and waited. His hands were steady, but her heart was beating fast. Lieutenant stood beside her, his face pale. He was young, only 25, and this was not the kind of first contact anyone had imagined. "What do we do, Captain?" he asked. "We wait," said, "we watch, and we hope they come in peace." The first message came 2 hours later. It was broadcast on every channel in every language. The voice was smooth and calm, like a teacher speaking to small children. "People of Earth, we have watched your world for many generations. You have reached a point in your development where contact is necessary. Do not be afraid. We mean you no harm. We are here to help you." The world let out a breath it had been holding. Help. They said they wanted to help. Governments sent messages of welcome. People gathered in the streets, some crying with joy, others with fear. The news showed nothing but the crystal ships and the endless questions. What did they want? What would happen now? The answers came quickly, and they were not what anyone expected. The landed representatives in every major capital. They were tall beings, almost 3 meters in height, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within. Strange geometric patterns moved beneath their flesh, like living circuits of light. They had no hair, and their eyes were deep purple without pupils. When they spoke, their voices were musical. They called a great meeting at the United Nations. Leaders from every nation gathered to hear what they had to say. Watched the broadcast from Seoul Station, her fists tight at her sides. The High Emissary, a being called, stood before the assembly. He smiled, but there was something cold in that smile. "We have studied your species for a long time," said. "You are creative, you are emotional, you have built impressive things for a species at your level, but we must be honest with you. In the great community of the galaxy there are many species. Some are advanced, some are still growing, and some," he paused, "some are not capable of growth." A murmur went through the assembly, felt ice in her stomach. "There is a test," continued, "a universal standard by which all species are measured. It is called the universal resonance. It is the language of the architects, the ancient beings who created life across the galaxy billions of years ago. Every advanced species can read this language. It is written on artifacts found on 1,000 worlds. If a species can understand the resonance, they are welcomed into the galactic collective as equals. If they cannot—" He spread his long silver hands. "They are classified as primitives, protected, studied, cared for, but not equals." The room erupted in shouting, watched as world leaders demanded to take the test. Of course, humanity could understand this language. Humans had decoded ancient scripts. Humans had built computers that could translate anything. Humans were clever. They agreed to the test. They brought scholars, scientists, linguists, and mathematicians from every country. They showed them the resonance, golden symbols that floated in the air like living light. The patterns were complex and beautiful. No one could read them. Not a single human could make sense of the symbols. The greatest minds on Earth stared at the resonance and saw only random shapes. Some thought they saw patterns, but when they tried to explain, their answers were wrong. Always wrong. After 1 month of testing, made his announcement. "We are sorry," he said, and he did sound sorry. "But humans are biologically incapable of understanding the resonance. Your brain structure is not compatible. This is not your fault. It is simply the way you were made. Earth will be designated a protected primitive zone. You will be safe. You will be cared for. but you will not be permitted to leave your solar system or develop certain technologies. This is for your own protection. Protected primitive. The words burned like fire. Turned off the broadcast and sat in darkness for a long time. Found her there hours later. "Captain," he said softly, "what do we do now?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but I know this, they're wrong about us, they have to be wrong." Life under the was not cruel. They did not hurt anyone, they did not take resources, they simply watched. Observers walked through human cities taking notes on tablets that glowed with soft light. They studied human art, human music, human food. They were polite. They were kind. And their kindness was worse than hatred would have been. Because their kindness was the kindness you show to a pet. Human government still functioned. People still went to work, raised families, and lived their lives. But everything felt smaller now. The stars that had once seemed full of promise were now a prison wall. Humanity was trapped on Earth, labeled too stupid to join the rest of the galaxy. Some people accepted it. They said they were probably right. After all, no human had passed the test. Maybe humans really were limited. Others refused to accept it. Resistance movements formed. There were protests and sometimes violence. They responded with patience and more tests. Always the same result. Always failure. But in a bunker deep beneath the mountains of Provence, far from eyes, something different was happening. Doctor was 67 years old. She had white hair and kind eyes and hands that shook slightly from age. She had spent her whole life studying patterns, not just mathematical patterns, but the patterns in ancient Korean shamanic texts, in traditional music, in the rhythms of nature. She had been laughed at by other scientists. Her work was considered strange and useless. Now she sat in a cold room underground, staring at captured images of the resonance symbols. Her young assistant brought her tea and waited. "Everyone is looking at this wrong," said finally. Leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Pointed at the screen. "They keep trying to read it like a book, like words on a page, but look at the structure. Look at how the symbols relate to each other. This isn't writing." "Then what is it?" Smiled, and in that smile was something that had been missing from Earth for months. Hope. "It's music," she said. "These aren't letters, they're notes. The architects weren't writing a language, they were composing a song." Stared at her, but they read it with their eyes, their skin patterns react to it. "Yes," agreed, "because that's how their bodies are built. They feel the vibrations through their skin. But that doesn't mean eyes are the only way to receive music. We humans," she touched her ear, "we have another way." That night made a call to an old friend in the military. By morning, Captain was on her way to the mountains. The fight for humanity's future was about to begin. Had changed. She was no longer a captain watching the stars from Seoul Station. Officially, she had been given a ceremonial position, greeting dignitaries and smiling for cameras. It was meaningless work, designed to make humans feel like they still mattered. Unofficially, she spent every free moment in the mountain bunker, protecting the most important secret on Earth. Doctor's team had grown. What started as an old woman and her assistant was now a group of 30 people. They worked in secret, funded by money that officially did not exist, hidden from censors by miles of rock and old Korean military technology. The bunker was cold and cramped. The lights flickered sometimes. The food was simple, but no one complained. They all knew what they were working toward. Had become the heart of the technical team. He was 30 now, thin and tired, with dark circles under his eyes. He had not seen sunlight in months, but when he looked at the data, his eyes came alive. "Play it again," he said. Sat at a strange machine. It looked like a piano, but it was connected to dozens of computers and sensors. She was only 21, a music student who had been recruited from the Seoul Conservatory. When they came, she had been preparing for a competition. Now she was preparing for something much bigger. Her fingers touched the keys and sound filled the room. But it was not just sound. The air seemed to shimmer. The lights flickered in patterns, and on the screen in front of them, the captured symbols began to glow. "There," said, pointing. "Do you see it? The symbols respond to the frequency. When plays certain notes, certain symbols light up." Stepped closer. She had seen this demonstration many times now, but it still made her heart race. "You're sure about this? The resonance is really music?" Nodded. She was 70 now, and her health was failing. The early experiments had exposed her to strange radiation from the resonance. Doctors gave her 6 months, maybe less, but she refused to stop working. "I am sure," she said. "The architects were not writers. They were composers. They created a language of harmony, of vibration. They read it with their skin because their bodies evolved to sense vibrations. Their geometric patterns are like receivers, picking up the frequencies." "But they think they're reading," said. He stood in the corner, arms crossed. He had joined secret mission 2 years ago. "They've built their whole civilization on the idea that they can read the architect's language." "Yes," said, "and they can in their way, but they're reading sheet music as if it were a novel. They see the notes on the page, but they don't hear the song. They get information, but they miss the meaning." Spoke softly. She was a quiet person, more comfortable with music than words. "When I play it, I can feel something. It's hard to explain. The notes want to go certain ways. There are patterns inside patterns. It's like the music is alive." Smiled at her. "Because it is alive in a way. The architects designed it that way. They wanted their message to grow, to change, to be added to. They have been preserving it like a dead thing in a museum. They don't understand that it's meant to be played." Walked to the window. There was no view, just rock, but she stared at it anyway. "So humans can actually speak this language. Not just read it, but speak it." "Better than that," said. "Humans can sing it, we can create new resonance, we can compose." The room went silent. Everyone understood what this meant. For 10,000 years, they had controlled the galaxy because they could read the architect's legacy. They decided which species were worthy and which were primitive. They held all the power because they held all the knowledge. But if humans could not just read the resonance but create it, everything would change. They would no longer be special. Their empire was built on a lie, and humanity had discovered the truth. "They'll kill us," said flatly. "When they find out, they'll destroy Earth." "Maybe," agreed. "That's why we have to be careful. We can't reveal this until we're ready." "Ready for what?" asked. Turned to face them. In 3 years, she had become the leader of this group. Not because she understood the science, but because she understood people. She understood sacrifice and duty and the weight of decisions that could not be taken back. Ready to speak so loudly that the whole galaxy hears us. Ready to prove that we're not savages. Ready to show them that humans are not children to be protected. We are equals, maybe more than equals. The months that followed were intense. Practiced constantly, learning to play the resonance with greater skill. Other musicians were recruited, sworn to secrecy, and trained in the bunker. They discovered that different instruments produced different effects. Piano was good for basic communication. Strings created emotional resonance. Drums and percussion seemed to activate dormant systems in the ancient symbols. Health grew worse. She spent more and more time in bed, but her mind remained sharp. She directed the research even when she could not stand. She wrote notes that filled hundreds of pages, a complete theory of resonance as music. "The architects were not just advanced," she told one night. "They were wise. They knew that any species could learn to read symbols with the right biology, but only a species with a soul could learn to make music. That's why they chose this form of communication. It's a test, but not the test they think it is." "What kind of test?" asked. "A test of spirit, a test of creativity, a test of whether a species can create beauty, not just understand it. They have been failing this test for 10,000 years and they don't even know it." Burst into the room, breathing hard. "We have a problem." Was on her feet instantly. "What happened?" They have announced a special ceremony. High Emissary is coming to Earth for what they call a cultural inspection. Human leaders are supposed to present gifts and demonstrations of our primitive arts. His voice was bitter. It's a humiliation ritual. They've done it on other planets. It's their way of reminding us of our place. When asked, 3 months. The room fell silent. 3 months was not enough time. They were still learning. Was good, but she was not perfect. There was so much they did not understand. But was smiling. No, said, don't say it. This is our chance, said. They want us to show them our primitive arts. We'll show them art they've never imagined. We'll sing to them in the language of their gods. We're not ready, argued. We need more time. I don't have more time. His voice was gentle but firm. And neither does Earth. Every day we wait, our people lose hope. Every day more humans accept that we are less than the. We cannot wait until we are perfect. We must act while we still have the courage. Looked at the old woman who had started this revolution with a simple observation, had given everything, her health, her remaining years, her life. How could do any less? All right, she said. 3 months. We prepare a demonstration that will change the galaxy, but we do it carefully. If they suspect what we're planning before we're ready to reveal it, everything we've worked for dies. The team threw themselves into preparation, practiced until her fingers bled. Musicians learned to play together, their instruments creating harmonies that made the resonant cymbals dance with light. Refined the technology, building portable devices that could amplify their music. And through it all, watched and guided, holding on to life through sheer will. The day of the ceremony approached. Humanity's moment was coming. They had called Earth savage. They had called humans primitive. They had looked at the dreamers and musicians and poets of Earth and seen nothing but animals. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Grand Assembly Hall in Geneva was filled with light and color. Flags from every nation hung from the walls. Cameras broadcast to every corner of Earth. And in the center of it all, standing on a raised platform like a king receiving tribute, stood High Emissary of the. He was magnificent and terrible. His silver skin glowed softly, and the geometric patterns beneath his flesh pulsed with slow, steady rhythms. His purple eyes looked down at the gathered human leaders with something that might have been kindness or might have been pity. It was hard to tell the difference. People of Earth, he said, his musical voice filling the hall, we are honored by your welcome. Today you will share your culture with us. We are eager to see what your primitive species has created. Stood in the back of the hall with. She wore a simple dress uniform, nothing that would draw attention. But hidden beneath her jacket was a communication device connected to, who waited in a van outside the building with the technical equipment. Are we really doing this? Whispered. We're really doing this, confirmed. The ceremony began. Human leaders presented gifts to the paintings, sculptures, poetry. Each gift was received with polite applause and condescending smiles. They examined human art the way a parent might examine a child's finger painting. Nice, cute, meaningless. Watched's face. He was bored. This ceremony meant nothing to him. It was a performance, a ritual designed to remind humans of their place in the universe. He had done this before on dozens of worlds with dozens of primitive species. But he had never met humans before, not really. The time came for the musical performance. This was normal. Every cultural inspection included music. They enjoyed studying how primitive species organized sound. It was like watching monkeys bang on rocks, amusing in its way. Walked onto the stage. She was wearing a simple white dress. Her hair was pulled back from her face. She carried no instrument. Behind her came 30 other musicians, each holding their tools. Violins, cellos, flutes, drums, and in the center a grand piano. Leaned forward slightly. This was different from other worlds. Most primitive species brought simple drums and basic wind instruments. The complexity of human musical tools was unexpected. Reached the center of the stage and turned to face the. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode. 3 months of preparation had led to this moment. Doctor had died 2 weeks ago, her last words a whisper of encouragement. Everything depended on the next few minutes. "High Emissary," said, her voice clear and steady. "We thank you for this opportunity. We wish to share something special with you today. Not just human music, but a message we have worked hard to prepare." Nodded graciously. "Please proceed." Raised her hands. The first note came from the piano. It was a simple sound, a single key pressed by a musician sitting at the instrument. But the moment it filled the air, something changed. Skin patterns flickered. The second note joined the first, then the third. The violins began to play, a soft harmony that wrapped around the piano's melody. The flutes added their voices. The drums began a slow, deep rhythm. Stood up from his seat. His eyes were wide. His skin was flashing wildly, patterns dancing across his silver flesh like lightning in a storm. "What is this?" he breathed. The music built, began to sing. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. It wove between the instruments, finding spaces in the harmony and filling them with meaning. The audience began to react. Some fell to their knees. Others pressed their hands against their chests as if their hearts were breaking. The air itself seemed to change. Light bent around the musicians. The great hall shimmered like a mirage. And on the walls, on the equipment, on its own ceremonial staff, the symbols of the universal resonance began to glow. Not just glow, respond. The humans were not reading the resonance. They were speaking it. They were creating new patterns, new harmonies, new meanings that had not existed before. They were composing in the language of the architects. "Impossible," whispered. Tears were streaming down his face, silver drops that fell to the floor like rain. "This is impossible. You are primitives. You cannot." His voice rose higher. The music swelled. Every instrument played in perfect unity, and the resonance responded with waves of light that filled the hall. Words formed in the air, visible to everyone, written in the language that they had claimed only they could understand. "The children of Earth remember." The song continues. The message was not from the humans. It was from the resonance itself. The architect's ancient system had recognized the music and responded with its own voice. For the first time in 10,000 years, the resonance was not just being read. It was being heard. Collapsed onto his platform, his body shaking. Around him, the other were in similar states. Some were crying. Some were laughing. Some sat in stunned silence, their worldview shattered in the space of a song. The music ended. Silence filled the hall. Stepped forward, her boots clicking on the marble floor. She walked past the kneeling, past the shocked human leaders until she stood facing. "High Emissary," she said, "for 3 years you called us savages. You said we were incapable of understanding. You treated us like animals in a zoo." She paused. "You were wrong." Looked up at her. His face was wet with tears, but his eyes were not angry. They were something else, something like wonder. "How?" he asked. "How did you do this?" "The resonance is not a written language," explained. "It's music. The architects designed it to be sung, not read. Your species sees it with your skin, but you've never truly heard it. We humans, we hear it differently. We hear it with our souls." Shook his head slowly. 10,000 years. We have been the keepers of the resonance for 10,000 years. We believed we were chosen. We believed we were special. "You were wrong," said, but her voice was not cruel. "But that doesn't mean you're worthless. It just means you're not the only ones who matter." The broadcast had gone out across Earth. Billions of people had watched the ceremony. Now they understood. They were not primitive. They were not savages. They had a gift that even the mighty did not possess. But the real message had gone further than Earth. The resonance had carried song across space, through the quantum fabric that connected all things. Other species had heard it. Other worlds had seen the light. And in the heart of the empire, in the crystal halls where the rulers met, alarm bells were ringing. The universe was about to change. Stepped down from the stage, exhausted but alive with joy, caught her as she stumbled. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it." "We did it," she corrected. "All of us, Doctor, the team, everyone who believed when the world told them to give up." Joined them. Outside the hall she could hear shouting. People were celebrating. The news was spreading across Earth like wildfire. Humanity had spoken in the language of the gods. But she knew this was only the beginning. They would not simply accept this. Their entire civilization was built on the belief that they were the chosen interpreters of the architects, learning that humans could not only understand but speak the resonance better than they could. Some would accept it. Many would not. War might be coming, but for this moment, this one perfect moment, none of that mattered. Humanity had found its voice, and it would never be silent again. In crystal halls and underground caves, in floating cities and desert colonies, the message spread like fire through dry grass. A primitive species had spoken the resonance. Not just spoken it, but composed new harmonies that the ancient system itself had recognized. Earth, the protected planet, the world of savages, had changed everything. On 100 worlds, species that had been classified as primitive began to ask questions. If they had been wrong about humans, what else had they been wrong about? How many species had been their place among the stars based on a flawed understanding? The collective called an emergency council. For the first time in 3,000 years, all 12 members of the High Assembly gathered in one place. Their crystal chamber hummed with tension. "This changes nothing," declared High Admiral. He was older than most, his silver skin marked with the geometric patterns of a military commander. "One world learned a trick. That does not make them our equals." "It was not a trick," said quietly. He had returned from Earth a changed being. He had not slept since the ceremony. He could not forget the feeling of the music moving through him, awakening something he had not known was sleeping. "I was there. I felt it. They spoke the resonance in a way we never have." "Then they must be silenced," said. His voice was hard as stone, "before their heresy spreads further." The council debated for hours, then days. Some supported. They had ruled for 10,000 years. That rule was based on order, on classification, on knowing everyone's place in the universe. If any species could challenge that order, the whole system would collapse. Others sided with. The architects had left the resonance for all life, not just the. Perhaps it was time to admit that their understanding had been incomplete. Perhaps it was time to share power with these strange, singing humans. In the end, it came to a vote. The decision was close, but faction won. The fleet would go to Earth, not to negotiate, not to study, to silence. On Earth, 3 weeks had passed since the ceremony. Everything had changed and nothing had changed. People celebrated in the streets, but the ships still floated above the cities. The observers still walked among humans, though they were quieter now, uncertain. Had been promoted to commander. It was an official title now, not a secret one. She led the newly formed Earth Harmonic Defense Force, a military unit unlike any that had existed before. Their weapons were not guns or missiles. Their weapons were instruments. "We have 30 trained speakers now," reported. He looked healthier than he had in years. The sunlight seemed to agree with him. "Another 100 in training if we had more time." "We don't have more time," said. She stood in the command center of their new headquarters, watching data scroll across screens. "Our sources say a fleet left their home system 2 days ago. 30 warships. Enough firepower to turn Earth's surface to glass." The room went quiet, stepped forward. "Can we fight them?" "With instruments against warships," shook her head. Not in any traditional sense, but always said the resonance was more than communication. She believed the architects left other things behind. Systems, machines, things that would respond to the right song. "You want to call for help," said. She sat in the corner practicing finger exercises on a small keyboard. "From the architects." "The architects have been gone for billions of years," pointed out. "Even if they left something behind, we don't know how to activate it. We don't even know if it exists. Turn to face them. Then we have 2 weeks to figure it out, because when that fleet arrives, we either have something to show them or we die." The days blurred together. Worked until she collapsed, slept for a few hours, then worked again. She and the other musicians tried every combination they could imagine. They played ancient songs and new compositions. They harmonized and improvised and experimented. Nothing happened. Meanwhile, panic spread across Earth. People who had celebrated weeks ago now prepared for the end. Some built shelters. Some prayed. Some spent their final days with family, holding each other and waiting. Refused to give up. She spent hours reviewing notes, looking for something they had missed. The old woman had believed so strongly that the resonance was the key to everything. She had died believing that humans would find a way. On the night before the fleet was scheduled to arrive, sat alone in her office. The lights were dim. She held final notebook in her hands. The last page had only a few words written in a shaking hand. "The song is not a weapon, it is a key. Do not fight, invite. Do not fight, invite." Read the words again. Something clicked in her mind. She ran to find. "We've been thinking about this wrong," said. "We've been trying to create something that would attack a weapon, a defense, but that's not what the resonance is for." Looked at her with tired eyes. "Then what is it for?" "Communication, connection. The architects didn't leave weapons. They left an invitation. We've been trying to fight when we should be trying to call." "Call who?" "Anyone who's listening." The fleet arrived on a Tuesday morning. 30 crystal warships took position around Earth, their weapons charged and ready. High Admiral broadcast his ultimatum. "People of Earth, you have disturbed the order of the galaxy. You have claimed abilities that no primitive species can possess. This cannot be allowed. You will surrender all knowledge of resonance manipulation. You will submit to neurological restructuring to remove this capability. Refuse, and your world will be sterilized." His response was broadcast across the planet. "Admiral, we will not surrender, we will not submit, and we will not fight." "Then you choose death," said. "We choose to sing." Across Earth, 10,000 humans raised their voices. In concert halls and city squares, in mountain villages and island beaches, musicians played and singers sang. It was not a coordinated piece. It was not a single melody. It was 10,000 different songs, all carrying the same message. "We are here, we are alive, we remember the song." The resonance spread outward from Earth like ripples in a pond. It passed through the fleet, making Admiral's skin patterns flash uncontrollably. It spread beyond the solar system, beyond the galactic arm, reaching places that had not been touched by music in billions of years. And in the dark spaces between stars, something woke up. The Guardians emerged from dimensions that humanity had never known existed. They were vast geometric shapes, bigger than moons, made of light and mathematics. They had been built by the architects before Earth's sun was born. They had been sleeping ever since, waiting for a signal. The signal had come. The Guardians surrounded Earth, not with hostility but with protection. Their presence was overwhelming. The warships looked like toys beside them. Admiral's weapons were meaningless. His fleet was meaningless. Against the creations of the architects themselves, they had nothing. A message appeared on every screen in the fleet, in the collective, across the entire galaxy. Words in the resonance that everyone could understand. "The children have AWAKNED. The song continues. All are welcome to learn." Admiral wept in his command chair, not from fear but from understanding. They had been caretakers, not masters. They had preserved the resonance, but they had never truly understood it. They had been waiting for the real singers to appear. And now they had. "Stand down," ordered his fleet. His voice was broken. "Stand down, it's over." On Earth, watched the Guardians filling the sky. They were beautiful beyond words, shapes of pure light that made her heart ache with joy and sorrow and wonder. "Doctor," she whispered, "you were right, you were always right." The war was over before it began, but the real work was just starting. Humanity had called to the stars had answered. Now came the hard part, deciding what to do with everything they had been given. 50 years had passed since the day the Guardians woke. The galaxy was not the same place. The collective still existed, but it had transformed. The old classifications were gone, no more primitives and advanced, no more protected zones and privileged races. The song had changed everything. Walked slowly through the memorial garden on Harmony, a world that had been built in neutral space for all species to gather. She was old now, her hair white, her steps careful, but her eyes were still sharp and her mind was still clear. The garden was filled with statues of those who had made this new era possible. Doctor stood in the center, carved from white stone, her kind face turned toward the stars. Around her were the musicians who had first spoken the resonance, scientists who had cracked the code, leaders who had risked everything. And ordinary people, thousands of names carved into the walls, people who had sung on that final day when Earth called to the universe. Stood beside, he was old too, but he still stood straight. "They're ready for you," he said. Nodded. "One moment." She touched statue gently. The stone was warm from the sun. "We did it, old friend, we really did it." The great concert hall of Harmony was filled with beings from 100 worlds. They were with their silver skin and geometric patterns. There were species from worlds that had once been classified as primitive, now standing as equals. There were creatures that breathed different gases and saw different colors and thought in different ways, but they had all come for the same reason. The first Galactic Symphony was about to begin. Stood on the stage. She was 71 years old now, but when she conducted, she moved like a young woman. Behind her was an orchestra unlike any that had ever existed. Human musicians sat beside players. Instruments from a dozen worlds blended together. Sounds that had never been combined before would soon fill the air. Took her seat in the front row. Beside her sat former emissary, who had become one of humanity's strongest allies in the decades since the awakening. His skin still pulsed with geometric patterns, but they moved in new rhythms now, patterns he had learned from human music. "Thank you for coming," said. Smiled. "I would not miss this for anything. 50 years ago I came to Earth to remind you of your place. I thought I knew everything. I knew nothing." "None of us did," replied. "That's the thing about songs. They're always teaching you something new." The lights dimmed. The audience fell silent, raised her hands. And the music began. It started soft, a single flute playing a melody that Doctor had hummed in the mountain bunker so many years ago. Then the strings joined in, weaving around the flute like vines around a tree. The instruments added their strange harmonies, sounds that vibrated through skin as much as ears. The resonance responded. Light filled the hall, patterns dancing through the air like living things. But this was no longer strange. This was normal now. This was what music had always been meant to do. The symphony built. Themes introduced, developed, transformed. Joy and sorrow, hope and memory. The long journey from a cold bunker to the center of the galaxy. In the audience, a young child leaned close to his grandfather. "Why did they call the humans savages?" he whispered. The old, his geometric patterns faint with age, thought for a moment. "Because we were afraid. We saw something in them that we did not understand. We saw creativity. We saw passion. We saw beings who made music not because it was useful, but because it was beautiful. And because we could not do what they did, we called them less than us." "But they were more," the child said. "No," the old shook his head. "Not more, different. better at some things. The architects designed the resonance so that every species would have something to offer. We are good at preserving. Humans are good at creating. Other species have other gifts. The mistake was thinking that only one gift mattered. The music swelled. Hands moved through the air, shaping sound and light. The guardians, those vast geometric shapes that now orbited harmony, began to pulse in time with the rhythm. They had been silent for billions of years. Now they sang along. What was the architect's first teaching? The child asked. Humility, the grandfather said. The knowledge that no matter how much we learn, we are still small parts of a very big universe. And the second. The old smiled as the music reached its peak. That every voice matters, even the ones we cannot yet hear. The symphony ended with a single note held by every instrument at once. The sound filled the hall, then the world, then the space between worlds. It was a reminder, a promise, a call to all the species still sleeping, still waiting to find their voices. The song continues. Closed her eyes as the applause washed over her. She thought of everyone she had lost, who had seen the truth when no one else could. Friends who had died in the early days before anyone believed. Musicians who had given their lives to perfect the art. All of them had played their part in this moment. After the concert, she stood on a balcony overlooking the gathering of species. Beings from across the galaxy mingled below, talking and laughing and sharing food. A child played a game with a human girl. A delegation from a newly awakened world asked questions of an elderly human musician. This was the inheritance, not power, not conquest, connection. Found her there. He was 93 now, barely able to walk, but he had insisted on attending. Quite a thing, he said, leaning heavily on his cane. Quite a thing, agreed. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Doctor had been wrong? If the resonance really was just writing, and we really couldn't understand it? Thought about it? Then we would have found another way. That's what humans do. We don't accept limits. We don't believe in impossible. If there's no door, we make one. Laugh softly. You know what they call us now. They have a word in their language. It means the ones who sing when they should be silent. I think they mean it as a compliment. I think so too. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the galaxy's children play. Joined them a few minutes later. Her conducting had taken all her energy, but her face was glowing with happiness. The next generation is ready, she said. Young musicians from 12 different species, all learning to compose together. The school on Earth has more applications than it can handle. That would have made happy, said. It makes me happy, replied. All those years in the bunker practicing until my fingers bled. I never imagined it would lead to this. A whole galaxy learning to sing. Below them, the celebrations continued. Somewhere, a musician was teaching a human child to feel vibrations through their skin. Somewhere else, a human was teaching a young alien to appreciate the rhythm of drums. The knowledge flowed both ways now, growing and changing and becoming something new. This was the architect's real gift. Not the guardians, not the technology, not even the resonance itself. The gift was the understanding that music, true music, belonged to everyone, that every species had a song to sing, that the universe was not a silent, empty place, but a concert waiting for performers. Looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, other species were waking up. Other worlds were discovering their voices. The song was spreading, reaching places that even the guardians did not know existed. They had called humanity savages. They had looked at human art and human music and human passion and seen nothing but primitive noise. They had been so wrong. Humanity was not savage. Humanity was the species that sang in the darkness, that created beauty from nothing, that refused to be silent even when the whole galaxy told them to be quiet. And now the whole galaxy was singing along. Smiled, somewhere she knew, Doctor was smiling too. The song continues, it always will.